At 7:14, under three antique chandeliers and in front of the mayor's table, the dishwasher everyone had mocked dropped to one knee beside a choking 12-year-old boy and asked the only question that mattered. Nobody in Marrow and Vine understood yet how the night had turned or who had seen it coming first. The dining room of Marrow and Vine had been rearranged to look generous. Round tables dressed in cream linen filled the main floor beneath three antique chandeliers. A silent auction wall stood near the bar, crowded with framed sports jerseys, spa packages, and donor plaques printed in gold script. At the far end of the room, a temporary stage had been built beneath the restaurant's exposed brick arch, where the city's mayor would deliver remarks before dessert. The guest list had crossed 140 by noon. By 5:30, the kitchen was already running 15 minutes behind. In the middle of all that polished urgency, Daniel Reyes stood at the deep stainless sink behind the service corridor, sleeves rolled above his forearms, rinsing trays with the steady economy of a man who understood that panic only made sharp things slip. He was 36 years old, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, and tired in the durable way that no longer announced itself, the kind of tiredness that had become structural. His black dish apron was damp at the waist. Steam climbed around him in pale bursts. On the shelf above the sanitizer buckets, tucked safely beside a dry stack of invoices, sat a small pink lunchbox with a broken zipper pull. It belonged to his daughter. Mia Reyes was 8, and because her after-school sitter had called out sick with the flu at 3:15, she was spending the evening in the manager's office with a coloring book, 2 granola bars, and strict instructions not to wander into the kitchen unless she needed her father. Daniel had repeated those instructions twice. She had nodded both times with the solemn seriousness children use when they can already tell their parent is carrying too much. Only later would some people in that building understand how much he had been carrying long before the dinner began. Marrow and Vine sat on the corner of Halston and 3rd in a restored brick warehouse downtown, the kind of place local magazines described as elevated without being inaccessible. Its owner, Vanessa Cole, had spent 6 years turning it into the sort of restaurant ambitious people used to signal taste, philanthropy, and importance to one another. She was 42, exacting, immaculately dressed even on kitchen nights, and famous in the city for 2 things: flawless donor events and a complete lack of patience for anyone who threatened them. Tonight's fundraiser mattered more than most. The dinner had been organized for the St. Gabriel Children's Foundation, a pediatric charity with enough corporate sponsors attached to it to make every seat politically useful. The mayor was attending with his wife and 12-year-old son, Owen. 2 hospital board members were expected. So were 3 council donors, a local news anchor, and the chairman of a development committee. Vanessa had been trying to charm for 8 months. Nothing about the evening was casual. That was why she had walked into the back corridor at 5:42, seen Daniel step away from the sink to dry his hands and check the time on his phone, and decided that what she was looking at was indiscipline. She stopped 3 feet from him, heels sharp against the tile, clipboard in one hand. "If you need a break," she said, loud enough for the prep line to hear, "you should have chosen a different night to become fragile." A beat passed. The prep cook nearest the walk-in lowered his eyes immediately. The pastry assistant kept piping whipped mascarpone onto dessert shells without looking up. In busy kitchens, survival often meant understanding exactly when not to become visible. Daniel slid the phone back into his pocket. "My daughter's in the office," he said. "I was checking whether she'd eaten." Vanessa's expression did not soften. If anything, it tightened with the particular irritation of someone who believed private burdens were a kind of professional imposition. "This is a charity dinner, not a daycare," she said. "Everyone in this building is sacrificing something tonight." The room did not go silent. Kitchens rarely did. Pans still moved. Orders still came through. Water still rushed at the sink. But the attention in the corridor shifted all the same, narrowing around them. Daniel said nothing. He had learned, over the last 4 years, that defending himself in front of the wrong kind of person usually gave them a larger stage. His wife, Elena, had died after an asthma complication that should have been manageable and turned catastrophic in under 20 minutes. Since then, Daniel's life had narrowed into rent, school pickups, lunch packing, shift work, and the quiet mathematics of endurance. He had worked loading docks, a hotel laundry basement, and 2 overnight cleaning jobs before landing at Marrow Vine 8 months earlier. Dishwasher was not glamorous work. It was not meant to be, but it was steady, and steady had become a sacred word. Vanessa mistook his silence for submission. "That station should have been cleared 10 minutes ago," she said, glancing at the racks waiting beside him. "The donors out front are paying for excellence. Try not to make the back of house look like a bus depot." Then she turned and continued toward the kitchen pass, where the executive chef was already arguing with a server about the seating sequence for table 7. Daniel picked up the next tray. He did not slam it. He did not mutter under his breath. He did not look after her. He rinsed, sorted, stacked, and sent clean plates forward with the same controlled rhythm he had used before she arrived. That was part of what made him easy to underestimate. He never performed hurt for an audience. He simply absorbed what needed absorbing and kept moving. From the office doorway, Mia had seen enough to understand that something had happened. She was small for 8, with dark curls tied back in a loose ponytail and a habit of watching adults more carefully than adults realized. She stood in the narrow crack of the half-open door, one hand holding her purple marker, the other clutching the edge of the frame. When Daniel noticed her, he crossed to her immediately. "I told you to stay inside." "You sounded mad," she said. "I wasn't mad." She looked at him with the unhelpful precision children sometimes possess. "You do that quiet face when someone's mean." For the first time that evening, something in Daniel's expression nearly gave way. He crouched to her height. "Did you eat the sandwich?" "Half. The other half too." She nodded, though not convincingly. Behind him, a server rushed past, carrying a tray of water glasses toward the dining room. Somewhere deeper in the kitchen, the printer began spitting tickets in a fast mechanical burst. The night was accelerating. Mia lowered her voice. "Do you have to stay the whole time?" "Yes, even if she talks like that again." He brushed a curl back from her forehead. "Especially then." She studied him for a moment, not because she doubted him, but because she was trying to understand the rules of a world that kept asking her father to endure things he did not deserve. Then she held up her marker-stained hand. "I made you something." It was a folded page torn from the back of her coloring book. On the front she had drawn him with a square blue apron, herself beside him with a crooked smile, and above them both a bright yellow sun with too many rays. In one corner she had written, in large, careful letters, "DAD, doesn't miss things." Daniel looked at it for a second longer than he meant to. Then he folded it once and tucked it into the chest pocket of his work shirt. "What's that for?" he asked. "You always say people tell on themselves if you watch long enough." He almost smiled. "That is not exactly what I say. It's close." It was close enough, because Daniel did notice things. Not in the dramatic way some people announce their intelligence, but in the quiet accumulation of details that other people stepped past. Which prep cook salted by instinct instead of measure? Which server forgot to repeat allergy notes unless made to? Which line cook plated garnish with his left hand when he was rushed? Which vendor labels changed shade when a supplier substituted ingredients at the last minute? He noticed dates, textures, smells, habits, and mistakes. Years before dish pits and utility shifts, he had spent almost 2 years in culinary school at Elmont Technical Institute, leaving only when Elena's pregnancy complications and the bills that followed made tuition feel like a luxury life had revoked. He never finished the program, but some knowledge, once learned carefully, does not leave just because it stops being profitable. At 6:10, the first plated appetizers began leaving the kitchen. Baby greens with candied walnuts, citrus vinaigrette, goat cheese crostini, a mushroom velouté for the premium tables. The event menu had been designed to look elegant without slowing service, which meant hidden complexity beneath simple presentation. Tickets came clipped with table numbers and donor notes. Staff moved faster. Vanessa hovered at the pass like an inspection blade, correcting napkin folds, garnish height, tray angles, and server posture with a level of scrutiny that would have made sense if perfection had ever been the same thing as cruelty. Daniel kept feeding the machine behind it all. Dirty plates in, clean plates out. Glassware rotated. Sheet pans sprayed, scrubbed, stacked. Service spoons returned to the line before anyone had to ask. He worked with the specific efficiency that comes from understanding how an entire room can begin to fail because one invisible station falls behind. Nobody in the dining room would remember his face. That, too, was part of the system. By 6:30, guests were seated. The mayor had arrived. So had his son. And in the kitchen, where the noise had risen into something metallic and relentless, Daniel glanced once toward the cold station and saw a prep bowl where it should not have been, a garnish spoon resting in the wrong tray, and a young expeditor moving too fast for the kind of dinner where one wrong plate could matter more than any speech delivered under the chandeliers. He said nothing yet, but he looked twice. Then he looked again. The detail was small enough that most kitchens would have missed it. A silver prep bowl of crushed walnut garnish had been moved from the salad station to the cold pass, set beside 3 identical bowls of toasted breadcrumbs and herb crumble. Under normal service, the distinction would have been obvious to anyone with time. Tonight there was no time. The labels had been wiped by condensation. The expediter working the pass was 19 on his second week, and moving with the brittle speed of someone trying not to be shouted at. 2 appetizer plates had already gone out with walnut dust where the herb crumble should have been. Daniel saw the 3rd plate being built. He stepped away from the sink. "Not that bowl," he said. The expediter, Trevor, did not even look up. "I've got it." Daniel was already closer. Table 12 is the mayor's. His son's allergy note was printed in red. That got one head to turn. Trevor paused with the spoon still hovering over the plate. "This isn't walnut." "It is." The executive chef, Marcus Vale, was at the hotline calling fire times on the halibut course. He was 48, fast, talented, and usually too proud to admit when the wrong person in the room had noticed something first. Vanessa stood 2 feet from him, scanning plated starters with the cold attention of a person who believed control could substitute for margin. Trevor looked at Daniel, then at Vanessa, then back at the bowl. He wanted authority to come from somewhere else. Vanessa arrived first. "Why are you off station?" she said. Daniel pointed at the bowl. "That garnish was swapped. Walnut's been plated on table 12. For one useless second, no one moved. Then Marcus crossed the pass, took the bowl, smelled it, touched a pinch to his tongue, and swore once under his breath. The room changed. Pull every first-course plate for 12, 14, and the mayor's adjacent tables, Marcus snapped. Now, rebuild them. Full wipe on the cold pass. Trevor, stop touching anything unless I tell you." A beat passed, and the kitchen that had been running on polished strain tipped into something sharper. Vanessa's face did not show panic. It showed offense. The kind that comes when reality interrupts a person's preferred version of events. "How many plates went out?" Marcus asked. "1, maybe 2, Trevor said, too quietly. Marcus looked at Daniel. "How sure?" Daniel did not inflate it. "Sure enough to stop service." That was their first mistake corrected. The second came 12 seconds later. A server rushed in from the dining room carrying 1 untouched appetizer plate. "Table 12 hasn't eaten yet," she said. The kid asked if there were nuts because he thought it smelled sweet. Nobody laughed after that. Marcus took the plate from her hand, scraped the garnish with the edge of a spoon, and held it up for Vanessa to see. Tiny pale fragments. Irregular, oily, walnut. For the first time that evening, Vanessa looked at Daniel as if he were not part of the wall. Only later would she understand that this was still the smaller problem. Because once Marcus started demanding answers, the sequence unraveled quickly. The walnut bowl had come from an afternoon prep transfer. Afternoon prep had used a substitute garnish after the usual supplier missed delivery. The substitution had been logged, but not transferred correctly to the event service sheet. The event service sheet had then been retyped by an assistant manager who assumed all cold station bowls were standard issue. The allergy notation for the mayor's son had been printed correctly, but the physical pass had already been contaminated by proximity, shared spoons, and speed. Marcus swore again, quieter this time. Vanessa turned to the service manager. No one says the word allergy in the dining room unless I say it first. Marcus looked at her sharply. That's not the issue. It becomes the issue if the mayor hears we nearly served his son walnut on a pediatric charity night. Daniel said nothing. He was already back at the sink, rinsing the emergency refire plates as though the conversation belonged to people paid to survive it. But Marcus was watching him now. What else? The chef asked. Daniel looked up. Marcus lifted the contaminated bowl slightly. If you saw this, what else did you see? There are moments when power reveals itself by speaking. This was not one of them. Daniel did not want the room. He wanted the answer to matter more than the person giving it. The vinaigrette batch was split too thin for the volume, he said. Someone stretched it with the wrong oil. That's why the greens are glossing instead of coating. Marcus's eyes narrowed. He reached for a spoon, tasted one of the waiting salads, and his expression hardened. Who cut my vinaigrette? No one answered. Daniel continued, because by then it was already too late for caution to be useful. And the mushroom veloute is tightening too fast under the lamps. If it sits another 6 minutes, it'll skin. Also, Table 9's shellfish note got clipped under Table 10 when the tickets were stacked. The room went quiet in pieces, not silent. Kitchens never truly were, but the attention shifted fully now, reorganizing itself around the man in the wet apron who was supposed to be invisible. Marcus moved to the ticket rail, checked the clipped orders, and found the shellfish note folded under the overlap exactly where Daniel said it would be. For God's sake, he said. Vanessa stared at Daniel with something colder than embarrassment. It was the beginning of uncertainty, and she did not wear it well. How would you know that from a dish pit? She asked. He said nothing for a moment. Then, because I'm looking. That answer landed harder than a speech would have. Mia, still half hidden at the office doorway down the corridor, had heard enough to understand that the room had changed. Adults were facing her father differently now. Not kindly. Not yet, but carefully. She clutched the edge of the door and watched. Marcus made 3 decisions in quick succession. Trevor, off the pass. Lauren, rebuild the cold station. Nina, personally walk the corrected plates to table 12 and tell them the kitchen refreshed the course due to a garnish error. Nothing more. Daniel, he stopped. The title he had for Daniel no longer fit the moment. Come here, he said instead. Daniel crossed the line, water still darkening the front of his apron. Marcus pointed at the appetizer board. You're seeing things before my pass is seeing them. I need that for the next 40 minutes. Can you work Expo? Vanessa cut in immediately. He's not trained for. He's trained enough to stop us from poisoning the mayor's son, Marcus said. A beat passed. Vanessa did not like being interrupted in her own kitchen. She liked being contradicted even less. But Marcus was not wrong, and the room knew it. Daniel glanced once toward the office. Mia was there, small and still, pretending not to be. He looked back at Marcus. My daughter, she stays in the office, Marcus said. I'll have someone bring her food. Daniel hesitated. Vanessa saw it and mistook it for weakness. She always did that. She had spent years confusing restraint with lack. If this is too much for you, she said, say so now. Daniel turned toward her. His face remained calm, but something in the room had changed enough that her words no longer controlled it. It's not too much, he said. For the first time, she was the one who had no useful reply. So Daniel stepped into the pass. He did not perform urgency. He organized it. Tickets were restacked by course and table sequence. Allergy notes were pulled and clipped high. Garnishes were separated into hard zones. Shared spoons were replaced. Heat lamp hold times were called out every 90 seconds. He moved plates 2 inches left or right and changed whether servers collided at the doorway. He rerouted one tray path so hot plates stopped crossing dessert traffic. He caught a missing microgreen garnish, a duplicated fish order, and a lamb entree headed toward a vegetarian donor before the tray cleared the line. The effect was not dramatic. It was precise, and because it was precise, the kitchen began breathing again. Marcus noticed first. The firing rhythm smoothed. Servers stopped bunching at the pass. The cold station recovered. Entrees started leaving in correct waves instead of panicked clusters. The room had not become calm, but it had become governable. Vanessa noticed too, though she noticed it the way people notice gravity after pretending they created the fall. At 7:05, the mayor began his remarks in the dining room. At 7:07, a waiter carrying 4 soup bowls slipped near the service turn because someone had left a rinse spill unmarked by the corridor mat. Daniel saw the shoulder drop before the tray tipped. He moved fast enough to catch the tray with one hand and steady the waiter with the other. Not one bowl fell. The waiter, a college kid named Evan, went pale. "I had it." "No," Daniel said. "You almost didn't." Then he nudged the caution mat flat with his shoe, marked the spill for cleanup, and went back to the tickets before anyone could make gratitude theatrical. He had not come there to impress anyone. He was there because things were failing, and failure in a room like this never stayed where it started. Then the second problem arrived. It came through the swinging back door in a navy suit with an earpiece and the controlled expression of a man who carried bad news for important people. He was one of the mayor's security detail, and he did not ask for Vanessa. He did not ask for Marcus. He said, "Who is Daniel Reyes?" No one answered immediately. The room felt it before it understood it. Daniel looked up from the pass. "I am." The officer stepped closer. "The mayor's son is having trouble breathing." Everything in the kitchen stopped meaning the same thing. A beat passed. Vanessa went pale beneath her makeup. Marcus swore once, very softly. Trevor stepped back, as if distance might erase his part in the night. Daniel was already moving. "What did he eat?" he asked. The officer shook his head. "Not the salad. The replacement soup. 2 spoonfuls, maybe 3. Throat tightness. Wheezing." Daniel's eyes shifted once toward the soup station. Then he saw it. Not the bowls. The spoon. The cream garnish spoon resting in the mushroom velouté pan had been swapped during the scramble. The same spoon that had touched the walnut crumble bowl earlier. Cross contact. Not the plate. The finish. He did not say "I told you so." He did not say this was avoidable. He did not look at Vanessa at all. He stripped off his apron and handed it to Marcus. "Call 911 if they haven't already. Ask if they carry an epinephrine auto-injector. If not, check the front host stand emergency kit. Mia stays in the office." Then he was already through the corridor door, moving toward the dining room where the chandeliers still glowed over linen and speeches, and people who had not yet understood how quickly an elegant night could become something else entirely. Daniel crossed the dining room at a pace that was fast without becoming chaotic, and that distinction mattered. Panic spreads by imitation. So does control. The mayor's table had already risen halfway to its feet. Chairs were pushed back at odd angles. Water glasses trembled where hands had struck the linen. Owen sat rigid in his seat, one hand at his throat, his face losing color beneath a flush that had begun at the neck and was climbing upward in blotched red islands. His mother was beside him, saying his name too often. The mayor was trying to ask 3 questions at once. None of them were useful. Daniel dropped to one knee beside the boy. "Owen," he said, voice level. "Look at me." The boy's eyes found him for a second. Wide, frightened, still conscious. "Can you breathe a little? Or not enough?" Owen tried to answer. The sound that came out was thin and wrong. Not full obstruction, not yet, but moving. Daniel turned to the security officer. Epinephrine? On the way. Too slow, Daniel said. He looked at Owen's mother. Does he carry a prescribed injector? In the car, she said. And the shame in her voice was immediate, because parents remember forgotten things most cruelly when those things matter. Daniel nodded once. No judgment, no wasted energy. He looked up at the staff gathering uselessly near the service arch. Host stand kit. Now. A server ran. Daniel's eyes went to the soup bowl. Mushroom velouté, cream finish disturbed by 2 shallow spoon tracks. He did not touch it. He did not need to. He already knew. Only later would Vanessa understand the full cost of having mistaken a man's station for the limit of his knowledge. Because Daniel had not merely spent 2 years in culinary school. During the months after Elena's illness began, when emergency room visits had become part of the architecture of their lives, he had taken a hospital food service job on weekends to keep their insurance from collapsing. St. Gabriel Pediatric, 3 blocks from where this fundraiser was being held. The same foundation being honored tonight had paid for one of the respiratory education programs offered to parents whose children lived one bad reaction away from catastrophe. He had sat through those trainings with Elena while Mia slept in a plastic chair between them. He had learned the signs of airway compromise, the order of response, the difference between a child who was frightened and a child who was losing the ability to pull air. He had not come there to be the hero of anyone's dinner. He had come because the boy in front of him needed someone who knew what mattered first. Owen, stay sitting upright, Daniel said. No water. Don't try to force a swallow. The boy nodded once, barely. The host stand kit arrived in the hands of a trembling assistant manager. Daniel opened it on the floor. Gloves, bandages, burn gel, no injector, of course not. The ambulance is 3 minutes out, the security officer said into his earpiece. 3 minutes is brief in traffic. It is long inside a closing throat. Daniel looked toward the stage. Who here is a doctor? For one useless second, no one answered. Then a woman near table 6 stood, mid-50s, dark green dress, hospital badge still clipped inside her purse strap. I'm a pediatric pulmonologist, she said, already moving. That changed the room. She knelt opposite Daniel, assessed once, and her face confirmed what he already knew. Early anaphylaxis, she said. Progressing. Daniel asked the question before anyone else could. If EMS is delayed? She looked at the boy, then at the kitchen arch, then back at him. We keep him upright, monitor airway, and if he crashes before they arrive, we start basic support and pray they're carrying EPI. The mayor heard the word pray and went white. Then a small voice cut through the room from the corridor. My dad keeps one. Every head turned. Mia stood in the service doorway with her pink lunchbox clutched against her chest. Daniel's entire body shifted. He stood halfway, crossed to her in 3 strides, and crouched. Why are you out here? She was scared, but holding steady in the way children do when they believe there is no room for them to break yet. Because mine is in the lunchbox, she said. For school. Nurse Patel said always keep the extra one close. A beat passed. Mia had a severe sesame allergy. Daniel carried 2 injectors on school days, one with the nurse, one with him whenever schedules went sideways. Tonight, in the rush of the sitter canceling and the shift starting and the office becoming a temporary waiting room, the lunchbox had stayed on the shelf above the dish station. Vanessa made a sound then, not a word, something smaller and worse, the noise people make when the shape of their negligence finally becomes visible to them. Daniel took the injector from the lunchbox with hands that did not shake. He looked at the pulmonologist. Pediatric dose. EpiPen Jr. She checked Owen's size with one fast glance. He's 12 but slight. Use it. The mayor's wife was crying openly now. Please. Daniel moved back to Owen. Listen to me, he said. This will hurt for a second. Then it will help. He placed the injector against the outer thigh through the boy's trousers and triggered it cleanly. A beat passed. Then another. The room held itself in suspension. Owen gasped once, sharp, involuntary, and clutched the chair arms. The pulmonologist counted under her breath, checked his color, watched his chest, listened to the next breath, and then the next. For the first time in nearly a minute, air began moving with less resistance. Not safe, not finished, but better. The room went quiet, not dinner quiet, not polite quiet, the deeper kind. The kind that arrives when everyone present understands they have just come very close to watching a different ending. Sirens sounded faintly outside. Daniel stayed kneeling until the paramedics entered, took over, confirmed the injection time, oxygenated the boy, and prepared transport. He gave them the exact sequence without flourish. Suspected walnut cross-contact, probable spoon contamination, onset after 2 spoonfuls. Pediatric epinephrine administered from a carried personal injector at approximately 7:14. The lead paramedic looked at him once and said, "Good call." Daniel nodded. Nothing more. Owen, breathing better now and frightened enough to be honest, caught Daniel's sleeve before they moved him. "Was I dying?" Children ask direct questions because they have not yet learned the adult superstition that avoiding words can avoid truth. Daniel answered him the same way he answered everything important. "You were in trouble," he said. "Now people are helping." The boy held his gaze for a second, then let go. The mayor turned toward Daniel then, but Daniel was already standing, already looking for Mia. She was 3 steps back, still holding the open lunchbox, trying very hard to appear brave enough for him not to worry. He crossed to her and crouched again. "You did the right thing," he said. She nodded once. Then, because the danger had passed just enough to let fear in, she threw her arms around his neck and held on hard. He closed his eyes for 1 second, just one. Then he stood with her against him while the paramedics wheeled Owen through the dining room and the guests parted in silence. Vanessa Cole remained near the service arch, hands clasped too tightly, face drained of all its practiced certainty. The event she had spent weeks controlling had slipped beyond her authority in under 4 minutes, and the man she had humiliated in front of her staff had just prevented it from becoming a public catastrophe with an ambulance report attached to her restaurant's name forever. By then, it was already too late to preserve the version of herself she preferred. The mayor returned 21 minutes later, not because the crisis was small, because Owen had stabilized enough for his mother to accompany him to the hospital while he handled the immediate fallout, and because men in public office often mistake remaining upright for leadership. The guests were unsettled. The speeches were gone. Dessert sat untouched beneath softening whipped cream. The foundation director spoke quietly with the pulmonologist near the bar. Staff moved with the stunned care of people who had realized the floor beneath the evening had nearly opened. The mayor asked for Daniel by name. This time, no one hesitated. Daniel had changed back into a dry prep jacket Marcus found in the office and was sitting beside Mia on an overturned produce crate near the service corridor, helping her zip the lunchbox closed. When he stepped into the dining room, every conversation thinned. The mayor crossed half the distance himself. There are apologies people offer to reduce discomfort. This was not one of them. "I'm told," the mayor said, his voice carrying farther than he intended, "that my son is breathing because of you." Daniel glanced once at the room, then back. "Because the doctor was here. Because EMS came fast. Because your son held steady." The mayor shook his head. "Before that, a beat passed." Then he extended his hand. Daniel took it. The mayor's next words were quieter, but the room was listening now with the full weight of its attention. "Thank you," he said, "for seeing what everyone else missed. Twice. Nobody in that room misunderstood what he meant. Vanessa heard it too." She stepped forward then, and for the first time all night she looked like a woman standing without armor. No clipboard, no angle, no performance of control, just the raw, expensive clarity of being wrong in public and understanding that she had earned every witness to it. "Daniel," she said. He turned. What she saw next made the apology harder, not easier. He was not angry in the theatrical way that would have let her answer pain with remorse and call the exchange complete. He was simply tired. Deeply. Cleanly. The kind of tiredness that comes from carrying too much and still doing what was required. "I spoke to you with disrespect," she said, "in front of your coworkers, in front of your daughter. I treated you as if your position told me the full measure of your worth. It didn't." Her throat tightened once. "And tonight, my failures put a child in danger." The room did not move, she continued, because stopping would have been cowardice. "I am sorry." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. He could have humiliated her then. Many people would have. The room might even have wanted it. He did not. What he said instead changed the room more than cruelty would have. "You need better allergy controls," he said. "Separate garnish zones, hard utensil separation, real emergency kits, staff who aren't afraid to speak when something's wrong. Not revenge. Structure. Not anger. Clarity." Marcus, standing just behind Vanessa, let out a slow breath that sounded almost like relief, because competence recognizes itself, and because he understood before anyone else that Daniel was using the only real leverage he had been given, not to punish, but to prevent the next child from needing luck. The mayor heard it too. "Send those recommendations to my office," he said immediately, "and to the St. Gabriel board." The foundation director turned. "I'd like them as well." Then the pulmonologist, still near the bar, added, "And if he's willing, I'd like to speak with him about our food safety advisory panel." That was the moment the social reversal completed itself. Not applause. It was better than applause. It was the visible reordering of value in a room that had spent the evening worshipping surfaces. Vanessa looked at Daniel with the first honest expression she had worn all night. "You should not be in a dish pit." He almost smiled, but not quite. "Tonight I was." The line landed softly. It also ended the discussion on his terms. Later, much later, after the guests had gone and the dining room had been stripped back to chairs on tables and half-melted candle wax on linen ghosts, Vanessa found Daniel in the office helping Mia into her coat. She stood in the doorway and did not enter until he looked up. "I called payroll," she said, "and my attorney. Starting tomorrow, you'll be listed as interim safety and service operations lead while we rebuild the kitchen protocols. If you want it permanently, the role is yours. If you don't, I'll still pay you for consulting on every change." A beat passed. "And I'm covering private after-school care for Mia for the next year. No conditions." Daniel studied her. Not the offer. Her, to see whether this was guilt spending money to quiet itself, or something closer to understanding. "What changed?" he asked. She looked toward Mia, who was carefully tucking her marker set back into the lunchbox. Then back at him. "I built a business around standards," Vanessa said. "Somewhere along the way I started thinking standards meant hardness. Tonight a man I dismissed saved a child in my dining room and corrected my kitchen without once trying to embarrass me." She swallowed. "That kind of authority doesn't come from status. It comes from character." "I was too blind to know the difference." He said nothing. Mia looked between them, then up at her father. "Does this mean you won't smell like soap all the time?" That did it. Daniel laughed. Small, quiet, real. Vanessa, to her credit, laughed too, though there were tears in it. A week later, St. Gabriel Children's Foundation announced a citywide food allergy safety initiative for partner venues, advised by a panel that included a pediatric pulmonologist, a hospital risk officer, Chef Marcus Vale, and Daniel Reyes. Marrow Vine installed color-coded allergen stations, locked emergency medication storage, mandatory escalation protocols, and printed authority protections for any worker who flagged a safety concern regardless of rank. Marcus insisted Daniel's name be on the training binder. Vanessa did not object. Owen recovered fully. The The mayor's office sent a handwritten note to Mia with a fountain pen signature and a box of art supplies far too expensive for a child who still preferred cracked markers and printer paper. She accepted them seriously, then used the nicest sketchbook in the box to draw her father in a clean white chef's coat he did not yet own. At the bottom she wrote, in the same careful letters as before, "Dad still doesn't miss things." On a quiet Thursday evening, after the new role had begun and the first truly calm shift in months had ended on time, Daniel locked the office, took Mia's hand, and walked with her out the side door into the blue-gold light of early dusk. The city moved around them in its usual indifferent rhythm. Cars passed. A bus sighed at the corner. Somewhere a siren sounded and faded. Mia swung the lunchbox lightly at her side. "Were you scared?" she asked. He looked down at her. "Yes. You didn't look scared." He considered that. Then, being scared and stopping are different things. She nodded as if filing the sentence where she kept the important ones. After a few steps, she asked, "Did that lady learn her lesson?" Daniel glanced back once at the restaurant windows glowing behind them. "Maybe," he said. "If she keeps listening." Mia thought about that. Then she slipped her hand more firmly into his. They kept walking. No crowd followed them. No music rose. No one applauded in the street. It ended the way the truest reversals usually do. Not with spectacle, but with a child beside her father, the night air cooling, the danger gone, and dignity restored so completely that it no longer needed to announce itself.